We're back, and we're going to ask you, Matt, about your wonderful book about beautiful animals, hungry animals that we all are and that we often eat. Um, and let's talk about cultured meat, which is basically factory or lab grown meat that you take a little piece of a real animal and then you reproduce it in a lab. So actually no animals hurt or harmed. What's your take on it? Because it is a growing field, but it's got some road bumps along the way or speed
Yeah.
bumps.
Yeah. So the first thing I want to say about cultivated meat is that I'm really excited about these possibilities, right? Because if there's one thing we've learned the hard way, it's that, you know, making real meat is incredibly resource intensive. It's not very compassionate. You might say it's cruel. It's really hard on the climate. It's really hard on the workers who have to ignore the cries of the animals who don't want to become sausages, right? Across the board, the cost personally and for our world of eating the 222 pounds of meat per person per year that we eat in the United States. I think that's statistics from 2018, and it seems to be going up every year. The toll that takes is huge. And so if we can get the same taste, right, better healthfulness with a vastly lower carbon and harm footprint, that is a possibility that I'm excited about exploring. Now, you're correct that, we're not at the place where we're scaling this yet. There are a few places where you can get it, right? In Israel, Malaysia, there have been events in the United States where, for a particular event, you could try the chicken or the duck or whatever it is they're working on. But right now, there's some science involved that we're going to need to figure out, right? There's a serum that you grow it in or brew it in. I'm not a scientist, so I don't claim to know, right, how this actually works in terms of the technology and the science. But I do know, right, we've got a scaling question to contend with. Luckily, I think there are some really exciting organizations out there right now that are helping to streamline this transition. The Good Food Institute, if you're not aware of that place, would be a great place for audience members to sort of see what's happening at the cutting edge of the cultivated meat. Sometimes it's called clean meat. Sometimes it's called cultured meat. Sometimes it's called, quote unquote, lab grown meat. But it's all right, what you described, cell lines that are actual animal cell lines that are then grown right into other things. But I think, right, I mean, we don't want to miss cultivated meat is exciting, but there are some other fronts in the alt protein movement that I think are every bit as exciting. I mean, what we're doing with plant proteins right now is exciting. What we're doing with mycoproteins, right? So
Well,
fungus. Yeah,
elaborate.
okay. So, there's basically sort of three fronts in what you might call the alt protein revolution. So what I mean by the alt protein revolution, we all know that by 2050 we've got to feed 10 billion people. Those of us who've been paying attention, including all of the relevant scientists and climate folks and stuff, know if we stick with the food system we have right now, we're not going to be able to feed 10 billion people, and we're probably going to make things much worse for the planet in the process, not to mention all that damage to animals and to our bodies and the rest. And so what the alt protein movement is trying to do is say, look, it's really hard to convince people not to eat these products. So let's try to find another way to make the products that everybody loves so that we can have our steak and eat it too, as it were. And there are sort of three ways that people are trying to do this right now, all of which we call collectively the alt protein movement. So the first way, which has been around for a long time already, is the plant-based approach. And so sometimes this is as simple as using tofu or tempeh or other soy products, right? Seitan, which is a vital wheat gluten. It's like a wheat meat to simulate, right, how meat tastes and feels in the mouth. That's been around for a really long time. In fact, some of those go back to ancient Asian cultures, have been around for thousands of years. But lately, there's been an effort to turn plants into products that taste virtually identical, right? So like Beyond Meat or the Impossible Burger, there's an incredible product called Juicy Marbles where they actually make I mean, what looks like a filet mignon, and it fries up like one. It's insane. We every now and then, we'll get it for a holiday, and it's actually for our vegan family, it's almost too meaty, right? It's like the meat eaters. One of my friends came over, and his son's favorite food is filet mignon, and so he gave some of this to his son. His son had no idea, that it was made from plants.
Yeah.
So that's the plant-based piece. Then there's what we were talking about before, right? The cultured meat, which is taking those cell lines and replicating them until you have right cuts of meat. And then a third approach is mycoprotein, which is basically the growing of fungus. And this is an especially interesting way to do it. People are already familiar with some of these products. Corn, Quorn, makes some of these. There's a bunch of others coming on the market now. There's also a company called Better Meat Company out of Sacramento, California, that's working on really scaling these technologies. But what people are so excited about with the fungus is that the replication happens much faster and requires much less sort of special inputs. And so the people who are working in that area are hoping, right, that they can scale it up more quickly, maybe than cultivated meat will be able to scale. But all three of these areas, I think, we're at a very, very exciting, indeed a pivotal time for investment in these things. And, we're seeing other countries, especially countries that have been food insecure or dependent on exports, really leaning into these technologies because it would be a way that you could provide, low carbon footprint, high nutrition, high quality protein without all the devastating things that come with, right, the industrial animal farming model.
Right. And do you think that in the future, like in 100 years from now, it will be the norm that we will no longer have livestock as we treat them now?
I certainly hope that that's true.
Hope it's not a strategy, Matt.
I know hope is not a strategy, but that's why I focus on strategies and not predictions. I think we human beings generally have a very hard time seeing what's around the corner. And I think a lot of the difficulties we have as a species is that our confidence is too high, right, about what we're going to be able to achieve. And so I guess what I would say is, yes, I definitely think that in the next 100 years, people are going to look at the current system in the way that we looked at some other things that have gone the way of all things, right? It's just going to be somewhere between, morally unimaginable and just sort of practically ridiculous, right? Like I don't know anyone sitting in a Tesla or sitting in a Polestar 3 or whatever it is thinking, gosh, I sure wish this was a horse and buggy. Life would be so much better, right? If this were still the 19th century in this regard. I mean, so I definitely think we'll be looking back askance, but I'm hesitant to make too many predictions. I'd like to focus on living joyfully in the present, using the best evidence we have, right, to move forward in the directions that we desire to see. I'm a big fan of that Gandhian notion, right, of being the change you wish to see in the world, rather than projecting too far ahead, right? And this leads to some interesting conversations with effective altruists and, other folks who really want to get us to move the horizon much farther out. I guess I'm a both and guy. I think everyone should do what they're called to do. And there are some people who, this idea of the cosmic calling that comes up in the book, right? Where I say, look, this is not a one size fits all. Everybody's going to have to find, right, that negotiation of fragility and flow. Well, what do we mean, right, by cosmic calling? It can be spooky, but it doesn't have to be. All I mean by it is, how does the world's need summon your desire? How do the circumstances we're facing, right, call out your best? And so, it doesn't have to be, right, a divine calling. It doesn't have to be, right, some sort of futuristic or weird mystical thing. It's just when you size up our predicament, what are you moved to contribute that increases, right, your joy, that enables you to be the change you want to see in the world? And Francis, I'll tell you what, I have no idea where we'll be in 100 years, but I know what I'm going to spend my limited time doing, and that's trying to capture the imaginations of as many people as I can, so that 100 years from now, we will be as far from the misery and sadness and shame and blame and destruction, right, of the current way we feed ourselves, and hopefully 98 years into something much, much, much more beautiful, right? At least that's what the goal that I've set.
Well said. Well, Hungry, Beautiful Animals is a fantastic book. It's you should pick it up. I'll put a link in the show notes. It's by Matt Halterman, and he's a professor. And you've done a fabulous job in the book at going vegan in a much more appealing way, not so finger wagging as so many other vegans do. I would love to have you back so we can discuss more of the practical aspects about veganism, whether it's healthy, what I need, don't I need animal protein? Can I survive without it? Or is it unhealthy? What about B12? And all sorts of other stuff. But for now, please go to the show notes and buy the book and learn a little bit more about it. And just remember, it's not an all or nothing proposition.
Absolutely,
you can be
not.
vegan one day a week. And that's the whole point, is that it's something that you should just step into and not think like, you're going to change your entire life overnight, because I think that intimidates a lot of people.
Absolutely. Get on the path one step at a time. Taste and see, baby, right? You take these steps slowly but surely, transformation awaits. So great to be with you, and look forward to coming on back.
Thank you.